Hi everyone, Venus and star blessings to you all. Today I'm going to talk about the full moon in Gemini, tropical zodiac. We're going to look at a few of the themes surrounding this full moon. Before I go into that, I just would like to mention a couple of things. Just wondering if you've all had an opportunity to check out the part two of astrological cycles in Babylon that I did with Rumen Kolev yesterday. I'm always so inspired when I share space with Rumen. He really is an extraordinary soul, an extraordinary man, an extraordinary astrologer. He's really a master at his craft. It is probably very new sort of knowledge to a lot of people who haven't studied the sky and the stars and the ancient doctrines and principles and techniques and so forth. So it can be a little bit tricky to follow, some of what's being said. But I think for those that are seeking bigger picture and deeper sort of aspects of understanding the sky, then one would make the effort. It's as simple as that. As you all know, my channel is not. It's never been or never will be commercial astrology. It's just I'm not a commercial consensus person, so this material is only going to appeal to a minority. That's a given, but that's okay. I was talking about that with Roman yesterday. I think it was before our recording or after our recording time, and he just said something that was so profound and just so meaningful relative to this context. And he said, "Well, Jesus Christ only had 12 students, the 12 apostles." So I thought that was yeah, it just really resonated at that time because we were just talking about, yeah, I guess the sort of people that would be interested in this type of material. It is very complex. You know, I think it takes a long time to study and understand, but it's about, I suppose it's about your desire, and your willingness to devote and commit the time to the discipline. So anyway, if you've checked out that video, there are some things that you will be able to follow, even though you may not have knowledge in Babylonian astrology, simply because of the way we sort of explained it. We pulled up a couple of chart examples. So check that out anyway. I'd be interested to hear your comments. I know several of you have already. So that's great. Now, the other thing I want to mention before I get into the full moon is just my next astrology course, which will start next year sometime. I haven't quite worked out the date, but it'll be the third course. I've already done two courses. So if you're interested in the first two, they're available. You can just send me an email and I can let you know of the content, etc. The third course is going to be more advanced material and will cover a lot of different topics. And I think the art and craft of astrology encompasses a few things. It encompasses, first of all, the mental faculty, the understanding of the literature, of the techniques, of the mythologies, just the simple well, it's not simple, but the understanding of the wisdom and the knowledge. I think the other component that is just as necessary is our intuitive faculty and employing our intuition when we are exploring this sacred science. And last but not least, the ability to synthesize and integrate everything. It's it's one thing to, look at a chart and say, okay, Mars is in Leo, in the second house. Well, that's just one aspect. I mean, there's a lot to say about that unto itself, but nothing is operating in isolation. Therefore, nothing is understood in isolation. It's that everything is integrating together in one way or another. So that's really the art of this sacred science. It's the ability to understand it all, intuit a lot of it, and then bring it together. So I'm bringing that up because that will be a lot of the focus in my third course. So if you're interested, just send me an email. Okay, so let me share my screen. We'll start with tropical. So this is a chart for the full moon, which is on the 15th of December, 8:01 p.m. Melbourne, Australia. So obviously that'll be the 14th for people in the Northern Hemisphere. The degrees of the moon is 23. Degrees of Gemini, 52 minutes. So the main feature, there are a few things going on, but okay, so there's the full moon, which is always the sun moon opposite each other. Jupiter is there next to the moon, but it is about 7 or so degrees away. Let's see. Saturn is squaring this axis, so the full moon, but that's quite far away. Neptune is squaring the full moon, and the square from Neptune is the closest aspect. So when we are looking at full moon, new moon, or anything for that matter, when we are looking at what's connecting to this theme relative to planets, forming a relationship to the theme in question, which in this case is the full moon, whilst it is important to pretty much assess everything, the planet that is going to be the closest in aspect is probably going to be the one that's going to really color and shape the energy of this full moon. So therefore, the focus here is most certainly Neptune. We'll get to that in a moment. The ruler of this full moon is Mercury, okay, because Mercury rules Gemini. And you can see an S here next to Mercury, which is showing us that Mercury is stationary at this point. It's stationary direct, so it's preparing to turn direct. And that's a very important part of where Mercury is in his cycle, or her cycle, or their cycle. And furthermore, Mercury is in a helical phase, which we talked about helical phases yesterday with Roman, and indeed just how freaking powerful these helical phases are of the planets. And just to put it very simply, the helical phases refer to when a planet is preparing to reappear or disappear within a 7-day orb either side. That is, the planet has formed a conjunction to the sun, okay? And it's basically going to be reborn as a morning star or an evening star. So Mercury at the moment, let me just pop out of this for a minute and bring up the Babylonian chart. So never mind these lines because they are from the previous tropical chart. So you can see the same date here, 15th of December, same time. And this is the Babylonian zodiac. We can switch to tropical, which would be just a click of a button here, and then it just moves everything to the tropical position. This is what I was trying to say about Ruman's program yesterday as well. It's easy to use from that perspective, so you can very easily switch from one system to the other, just like that. It's like a click of a button. So in terms of the Babylonian chart, well, first of all, you can see Mercury here shaded out in grey with an X next to it, and you can see it says MF3. So basically, what that's showing us is that Mercury is currently still invisible, well, at least in the southern latitude of Australia. Now, remember, when regarding heliacal phases, it is very much based on latitude. That's geographical latitude. So that's very important to keep in mind. And those, it can change quite a lot depending on latitude. So Mercury's appearance in New York, USA, could be very different to the appearance date of Melbourne, Australia, for example. Okay, so it's just always too important to remember that. In any case, what this MF3 is showing us, and Mercury shaded out in grey, is that Mercury is invisible. It's already formed a conjunction to the Sun, which was the Cazimi that happened, I don't know, a week or so ago. And this is Mercury basically preparing to be reborn as a morning star. The morning star is Apollo. Apollo is the light. So this is an important factor in this full moon, Gemini full moon, because Mercury is the ruler. And so it's always very important to assess the ruler of the full moon or the new moon, for instance, right? So going back to tropical chart, so we know now that not only is Mercury stationary, it's actually still invisible, and it's 3 days away from becoming visible. So it's in a helical phase, meaning it's going to be reborn as a morning star and reappear in 3 days' time. How is this important relative to the full moon? It's very important because it's the ruler of the full moon, number one. Number two, when a planet is stationary, that's a very powerful zone for that planet, whichever planet it is. Stationary period is always it's a very potent field. The fact that it's invisible is another layer that's very significant as well. And the fact that it's in a helical phase is extremely important. As we learned yesterday, if you caught that video between myself and Roman, where we spoke about helical phases and the sheer power of planets in a helical phase. At a symbolic and metaphysical level, when a planet is invisible, its energy is with the divine. And it's basically preparing to come back to Earth, as it were, and prepare for a new cycle. So, and I mentioned this in a video, I don't know, a couple of weeks ago, where I said that one of the things to know about when a planet is invisible, it's actually said to be with the source, with the divine, and it's giving an account to the source of what we have been doing relative to that planet. So there's something really powerful going on here with Mercury during this full moon, and that's very important to keep in mind. The qualities that are really highlighted here are, of course, Gemini being an air sign, okay? Venus is also in an air sign, Aquarius. And, the sun is in a fire sign, sure, Sagittarius, and Jupiter is the ruler. But Jupiter is in Gemini and, reasonably close to the moon as well. So this full moon began at the new moon in Sagittarius a couple of weeks ago. And typically, whatever we intended during that time, during the new moon, it is likely that we will begin to see the fruit of those intentions during the full moon. And or keep in mind that the full moon, because it's an illuminator, a light, it can illuminate things that were just out of our vision, that we may be able to just see more clearly now. And as a result, we may start something new. And I bring that up every time when I talk about a full moon because no one really mentions it. Everyone mentions that the new beginning is at the new moon. Of course it is, but there can be a new beginning at the full moon purely because you may see something at the full moon and as a result change your mind and start something else altogether. You can make a different decision. So that's a new beginning as well. So because it started out in Sagittarius, which is a sign that corresponds to truth seeking, wisdom, philosophy, metaphysics, travel, culture, other cultures, languages, all those sorts of things. It's the thirst for truth and wisdom, basically. So if we had something going on around, I mean, we could have had just something around traveling or travels or, it just depends. Obviously, it's very difficult for me to speak to every single one of you because there's 8.5 billion people on the planet. So generally speaking, whatever this energy brought up or you intended with at the time relative to Sagittarius themes, 2 weeks later, the moon has moved on and now it's opposite the moon. So here it is lighting up for us, perhaps some of those intentions, some of those stories, some of those themes. And a lot of it can be very much connected, of course, to learning and studying and information and teaching and speaking and writing, things of that nature, all the mercurial Gemini elements. And of course, Jupiter is in Gemini as well, as per the tropical zodiac. So if there's been matters around learning and studying, this can be quite a interesting time for us during the full moon. Also, it can, obviously highlight a lot of our own thoughts, things that we've been thinking about, conversations we've been having perhaps with certain people in our life, whether it's new people or whether it's people we've known for a long time, whatever it is. Because, of course, Gemini always corresponds to, conversation, dialogue on multiple levels and multiple layers. Now, one thing that Ruman said yesterday as well, which I really loved, and I thought this statement really speaks so closely to this full moon. He talked about something called mental ghosts, and I loved that idea, that concept. And he was talking about it in the context of we all have mental ghosts, and those mental ghosts will be dispelled the moment the light shines on them. And so, mental ghosts, of course, can be very much connected to Gemini, right? Because of the mental stimulus that goes on within us, daily, 24/7. It never stops, right? Even when we sleep, there's a process that's going on with our subconscious and unconscious mind and psyche. There's always something going on. And that's why sometimes you can wake up feeling, really heavy-minded, heavy head. You can wake up with a headache, or a migraine or, whatever. Or you can wake up feeling fantastic. Just depends what was going on in your sleep, right? That reminds me, actually, with regards to Mercury being in a helical phase at the moment, preparing to be reborn as a morning star, which is Apollo, the light. One thing that can also be understood about planets being invisible, not only are they with spirit and with source, because they are invisible relative to our perspective here on Earth, It means that there's something that we are not privy to seeing, with our naked eyes, as it were, let's say, or with our conscious mind. But that doesn't mean that because something is invisible that it's not active or that there's nothing happening there. In fact, there's a lot going on. It's a little bit like, not exactly the same, but just to use a basic example, it's a little bit like the nighttime and the night sky and the energy of the night versus the energy of the day. Excluding, focusing this energy of day and night so much in particular environments, but generally speaking, the daytime, has a lot of activity. People are busy, people are going to work, people are going shopping, doctor's appointments, whatever, right? And then in the nighttime, there's a different vibration going on, isn't there? We may take rest, we may just meditate, we may just lay on the couch and chill out, zone out, listen to music. We go into a very different field, right? Even just on that physical external level. And we can take it even further and say, okay, when all the lights are out and it's completely dark and you can't see anything, is it not true that there's still life there? There's still energy present. There's still movement. There's still things going on. We just cannot see it with our physical eyes. So that's another way of kind of thinking about planets in their helical phase when they are going invisible. There's actually a lot going on, but it's happening in a way that we can't see it in our physicality with our physical eyes. But the power of it is is undeniable, right? So this full moon in Gemini, as I said, because it's ruled by Mercury, and Mercury has got all these layers to it: stationary, direct, it's invisible, it's in a helical phase, it's going to be reborn as Apollo, and Apollo is the truth and the light. Apollo connects to a lot of things regarding the arts, creativity in the arts, and music and musical instruments, and he taught. I think Ruman mentioned it yesterday as well, like the nine muses. I think he taught them quite a lot of their talents and things like that. So Apollo was, is a pretty huge divinity from the point of view of his talents and abilities and everything that he was able to teach and offer other divinities and so forth, right? So he's quite an important divinity to really observe from the point of view, because in ancient astrology, when Mercury is a morning star, it corresponds to the divinity of Apollo. And when Mercury is an evening star, it corresponds to the divinity of Hermes. And whilst there may be some similarities, they are different divinities. There's also an asteroid, Apollo, that you can track as well, by the way. And if you are a very creative person, and or someone who studies, practices astrology, is interested in the truth and the light and sacred occult, secret wisdom, science, all that sort of stuff, I think Apollo is one to really look for as well. You could have the asteroid Apollo on your ascendant or conjunct your sun or your moon. You kind of want to be looking at those points mainly, but certainly if it's conjunct Venus or Mercury, I would be paying attention to that as well, of course, and Jupiter for that matter. Anyway, that's just a side note. So even though it's a full moon, which is illumination, yes, certain things will be seen, yes, But there are still certain things that won't be seen just yet because Mercury is at this critical point. Furthermore, I think what adds to this is the fact that Neptune is squaring this full moon. And Neptune is always a tricky planet. When it comes to the outer planets, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, my favorite astrological school of thought that has, for me, the greatest depth and the clearest understanding is Jeffrey Wolf Green's school of thought, evolutionary astrology. Hands down, he's nailed evolutionary astrology. On the other hand, though, we must always remember as well that this chart here that we're looking at, which is a tropical zodiac, this chart is one layer, right? If we go back to the Babylonian chart, look at this. Look at all the constellations. There's hundreds upon hundreds of stars here. There's only a certain amount of portion of them that Roman has decided to put the names in for. But see all these little dots everywhere? These tiny little dots, they're everywhere. Inside the chart, outside the chart, they're all stars as well. So there's a lot going on, yeah? And even with this full moon, basically the full moon is 29 degrees Taurus. 29, 29, 29, 30 degrees of Taurus in the Babylonian zodiac. So let me just clear some things so I can show you something. Okay, just bear with me while I clear these lines. Okay. So let me just take out a few things. Now just take note of the moon. It's right there. Okay. I'm just going to remove the planets now as well. Okay. So remember, the moon was sitting around here, which is actually next to a star called Elnath, which, what does it literally mean? I looked it up. I've just forgotten. It's something about headbutting. The one who butts, who butts their head, or gores, Gores. And if you look at the where is it? It's at the constellation, in the constellation of Taurus, right? The bull. But it's basically sitting at the tip of the horn of the bull. Okay. And so this star is very specific to the constellation Taurus, but also even more specific to the fact that it's at the tip of the horn of the bull. It's said to have a Mars type of nature to it, but then there are other thoughts that suggest it's got Mars and Mercury actually. Mars and Mercury nature is what most primary modern astrologers associate with it, but Ptolemy expresses that it is of Jupiter as well. It's a fairly positive star. It's got some negative things about it, as pretty much most stars do, but it's not one of those dire straits type of stars. Anyway, it's at the tip of the bull. That's where the full moon is in the constellation of Taurus, but projected into tropical Gemini. And that's part of the energy, of this Gemini full moon as well, that needs to be considered. And I guess the takeaway perhaps might be, given that the name Elnath means the one who butts, perhaps that is showing us that we might be, we might be keen to point our horn and butt our head, with somebody, right? And perhaps given that in tropical it's in Gemini, that might come through, our words, right? And things, our opinions. We might just be so opinionated, about certain ideas we have. That's more of a perhaps a negative side in the sense where if we are so opinionated that we cannot keep an open mind to other opinions, that's us with the horn of the bull just butting our head, right? Saying, no, this is my opinion, and my opinion is right, and therefore your opinion is wrong. So that's an energy we might have to watch there. Furthermore, the square by Neptune, as I was saying a moment ago, Jeffrey Wolf Green really does an amazing job in speaking to the outer planets in such a profound way, and particularly with Pluto, but with all three actually, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. Anyway, Neptune in that model describes the source, the spirit, right? The divine source. Pardon me, the divine source creation to all things, spirit. So Neptune is the cosmic oceans. It's connects to the collective unconscious. It connects to dissolving form and structure. It connects to if Neptune is aspecting the sun and the moon, in this case, it's squaring both. It can correspond to difficulties with having proper boundaries. The ego gets annihilated here because it gets dissolved by the energy of Neptune. Personality ego kind of gets, it doesn't have the same sort of strength that ideally it would need. So there can be a weakness of will and energy that's implied here. It can also be disillusionment and illusions and confusion, perhaps with, well, relative to the Gemini full moon, maybe with information or communications, or things that we're studying and learning. There just can be enormous confusion. There can be an over-idealistic perspective on certain things that you have an opinion about, and you're not seeing the forest from the trees. There can be that. It just depends on what is going on in our life and where this energy will be highlighted for us. At a more transcendent level, it's the yearning for the divine. It's the yearning for the spiritual realm, the spiritual food, the spiritual nourishment, the yearning for spiritual connection. It opens the door to the more transcendent spheres and levels. But full moon in Gemini can have a lot of mental ghosts lurking around. But I guess that the amazing thing is that whilst the full moon can be mental ghosts, which that's something that, we need to monitor ourselves. And I must have had a few of those floating around just before I jumped on to do this recording, because my head felt really heavy, and it was starting. I had a really bad headache, and it was just trying to push into a really intense headache. And so I actually did a sage clearing just before I sat down to do this recording, and I'm not exaggerating at all. As soon as I did that sage clearing, my whole head just cleared. The heaviness, the headache, the pounding, everything just left. So those mental ghosts that were trying to invade my brain were dispelled actually just by the sage, which doesn't surprise me, because that's, if you if you understand the power of sage, and if you have that very specific intention when you are burning sage, you know, there's a lot of power. There's a lot that can happen in that moment, which is what happened for me just, you know, half an hour ago. I was just going to say that even though we may have a lot of mental ghosts, I really love that phrase now. That I'm going to be using that, I think, forever now. Just, you know, when you hear somebody say something that has, for you anyway, has a profound connection to you for some reason, and it has, you know, it's wisdom, right? It just stays with you because it makes an impression. You know, it touches you somewhere that is beyond the mind, right? That's what happened with when Roman used that phrase. So that's why I'm using it today because it just resonates so deeply. But because Mercury is going to be reborn as a morning star, which is Apollo. Now remember, with mental ghosts, the way they are dispelled or dispersed is by the light. And what is Mercury morning star? It's Apollo. What's Apollo? Apollo is the light. So if there have been certain themes where you've had these mental ghosts, and maybe the square from Neptune is bringing up some confusion around those thoughts or conversations you've had or information you've been given, which maybe hasn't been accurate, it's been misinforming, you know, whatever it is. The good thing is that Mercury, 3 days later, appears as a morning star Apollo. So it's literally going to dispel those mental ghosts that this full moon vibration could be holding, which, you know, is beautiful. It's just beautiful, and it can really help us with the downside to Neptune squaring this full moon can be all that, you know, idealistic disillusionment type of stuff. But that'll be up to us to really be very aware during this full moon that the information we are perhaps focusing on, or what we are listening to, or the dialogue we are exchanging in, we may not be hearing it in the way that it's intended, or it may be very confusing, or it may be very dishonest. It just depends. So it's good to be aware of that so that you can have your wits about you, and also just keep an open mind. You know, Neptune can color things and distort things in such a way where we are so fucking disillusioned, like really, you know, really disillusioned. You cannot see with Neptune the truth of a situation, not because of Neptune, but because of our own projection of the ideal onto the imperfect. That's all it comes down to. So when Neptune moves away, if say you had a Neptune opposite the sun, transiting Neptune opposite your sun, you know, that's one of the most difficult transits for a lot of people, and especially earth signs. I know someone who's going through that, has been going through it for a while and still in it. And, you know, we're talking about like a really super, super, super intelligent, deep, wise individual who's quite blindsided by something very specific. So it can affect the best of us, you know, it can affect anyone, you know. Never assume because we have gained knowledge and understanding and experience and wisdom that we can't be affected at all, because we can. That's just a fact. So during this full moon, yeah, I think it's going to be very important to try and, you know, try and anchor into something that can keep you fairly grounded, you know, because this is a mutable T square, right? The sun in Sag, that's a mutable sign. The moon in Gemini, mutable sign. Neptune in Pisces, mutable sign. That's the mutable part of the mutable Grand Cross. The other one is Virgo. Mutable signs, the energy of mutability is wonderful from the point of view of helping us be more fluid and flexible, and able to flow in and out of whatever it may be. And for that reason, we can have a lot of different experiences. But the flip side to that coin is your energy is just dispersed all over the place, and it's not anchored into any one thing. It's just jumping from one thing to the next. And that can create a lot of confusion. And add Neptune into the mix, which Neptune is forming a T square to the full moon, in mutable signs, you can just imagine, the fluidity of that. And if we've got a lot of things going on in our life that might be a bit challenging or a bit confusing, or anything else that's not necessarily easy to handle, this Neptune might trip us up a bit. So we really have to be careful to ground this energy as much as we can, because the more inclined position to take is to just have it flowing around everywhere, as it were, and again, if there's nothing deeply problematic going on in your life, that's probably not going to be a problem, but if there are some themes and issues going on that can really throw you off in all sorts of directions, and you don't feel centered, you don't feel grounded, and I think feeling grounded and centered is very important, especially while we are in a physical body, living on an earth, a physical earth plane, right? So just something to keep in mind there with this full moon. Let me see. Mars is retrograde, as we know. It just turned retrograde not so long ago. So our Martian Mars energy is taking a step back, It's our will forces are being channeled internally, opposite Pluto. The Pluto and Mars, both of those planets speak to willpower. And Pluto specifically corresponds to the soul's desires. Mars is more the personality or ego desires, you could say. So there is an opportunity here for us with Mars retrograde particularly to integrate our internal willpower, passions and desires for a bigger purpose, connecting to our soul. And this is going to be active until, I think March or something next year. I said I might come back and speak to that separately unto itself, so perhaps I'll do that. But I just wanted to point out that in this full moon cycle, this is what Mars is doing. Mercury stationary, direct. We've talked about Mercury quite at length. And Venus, of course, is now in Aquarius. This triple conjunction with Pluto and Ceres, this is not an easy energy. Okay. I have spoken about it, so I will not go into it again. But I just want to mention something. The other day, one of my friends told me that on the news here in Melbourne for the last couple of weeks, or last week, I think, they've identified certain, I think it's individuals driving they called it a transit van, lurking around young children, trying to lure them into their car or van. And there was a series of them that happened over a week. And it all happened when Pluto and Ceres were conjunct, and Venus as well. So look, that's really interesting, because when you see Pluto Ceres, that can be abduction. like literally, that always Pluto series corresponds to abduction, amongst many other things as well. But I just wanted to mention that because on a collective scale, that's what it pointed to here in Melbourne, Australia, at least, which didn't surprise me at all when my friend told me that. I don't watch mainstream news, so I missed it. Sometimes it's worth watching mainstream news just for the benefit of these astrological alignments that are occurring, and how you can see what's going on. As I always say, the best way to learn the sky, the stars, the planets, the constellations, is by observation and correlation. Simply put, even the helical phases, the planets' helical phases, which derive from where astrology originally was born, the mother of astrology was born in Mesopotamia. The priests in those days would record these helical phases of the stars and the planets with their naked eyes. They had priests that were operating 24 hours around the clock. That is, they had these massive diaries and they were documenting every single thing they were observing in the sky and every single thing they were observing on the earth. And they did it with their naked eye. It's mind blowing when you think about that. It's the implications of that are just so vast. But anyway, that's another subject for another day. Okay, I'm going to leave it there, guys, and I will perhaps see you another time before Christmas. In case I don't, I wish you all a Merry Christmas if you do celebrate that particular holiday. I do want to say Happy New Year as well. Not that I believe that is the true New Year, because I follow the calendar of the sun's path in tropical zodiac 0 Aries. To me, that's the beginning of the true New Year, the astrological New Year at least, because the New Year in this calendar that we work with, what has it become, or what has it ever been, really, other than some commercial mainstream holiday that promotes most people go out and just get off their face. And I'm not judging that because I've done that many a times in my life. And then, the classic New Year's resolution. Everyone makes them and pretty much no one ends up doing what they say. Yeah, so it's a funny holiday. Anyway, regardless of all of that, everyone's different, so everyone has a different experience or perspective, I suppose. I just bring that up because I may not see you before the so-called New Year. If I don't, I wish you all safe travels if you are traveling, peaceful time with your family and loved ones and friends, or yourself. You might just be alone. There's many people that are alone on these days. And some people are okay with that, but there's many people that would not be okay with that. It can be a very difficult time. For me, it's not so easy either because I miss my dad so much. I miss my dad every day, but during these times, it becomes a little bit more intense as well, because I would spend Christmas Day with my dad every year without fail. Anyway, that's life, right? We're all here for a certain amount of time. And if we can learn and grow and become more conscious and love more, then, we've actually accomplished quite a lot, in this incarnation. I'll see you guys soon. Much love and bye for now.